What if your reflection didn't just mimic you, but watched you, learned from you, and waited? We've all stood in front of a mirror and wondered, what's really on the other side? Is it just glass, or is something watching back? Welcome back to Whispering Abyss, where late nights come alive with voices you don't want to hear alone. Tonight's episode is not for the faint of heart. If you've ever had a strange feeling when walking past a mirror, a fleeting movement at the edge of your vision, or a sense that your reflection might just be a second too slow, you're going to want to keep the lights on. We're diving into 5 haunting mirror stories, each more disturbing than the last. From a cursed antique mirror to reflections that don't want to let go. These stories will... Which story made you the most uneasy? Let us know in the comments, and if you've got your own mirror tale, we'd love to hear it. Story 1. The mirror in room 313, they tell you a mirror only gives back what you show it. I believe that until the night my reflection learned how to move before I did, like it had been practicing one night and then out. That promise fell apart the first time I heard knocking from an empty room. The building was the kind that creaks in a breeze, the kind with old terrazzo floors that hold the chill of winter all year. Disinfectant never fully covered the smell of rain that seeped through cracked windows or the metallic scent that clung to the vents. Room 313 sat at the far end of a hallway nobody charted anymore. Chains had once looped the handle. Yellowed tape still hung there like old cobwebs. We weren't supposed to go near it, which is exactly why I kept glancing that way, like a moth testing the hot edge of a bulb. My shift started quiet. The hum of fluorescent lights and the steady beep of monitors, a lullaby for the anxious. I took vitals, refilled 4 bags, and texted my mother between tasks. She told me to be careful in storms. She always says that. At 1:47 a.m., mister. Lawson in 209 grabbed my wrist with fingers far stronger than his chart allowed and hissed, "Don't let her out again." I heard her breathing. I asked who. He stared past me, eyes flooding with the kind of dread that age does not blunt. "The lady in the mirror," he whispered, and I laughed too quickly, like that could make it ridiculous. The hallway to 313 ran colder than the rest of the floor. You felt like a tide around your ankles first, then higher. I checked the thermostat once, twice, 3 times, and it never answered why steam would bloom from my breath there, why the hairs on my arms rose every time I passed the tape door. Maybe you think I'm exaggerating for effect. I wish I were. The first time I touched the knob, I flinched. It was colder than the steel of a morgue drawer, so cold my skin squeaked against it. Then I noticed the faintest wisp on the other side of the door. Folk, not from our side. The fog curled against the gap at the threshold, as if the room inside were exhaling. I should have called the supervisor. I should have called anybody. My mother's text lit my phone at that moment. "How's your night?" she wrote. "Quiet." I lied and opened the door to 313 by an inch, because curiosity is a flaw that looks like competence until it gets you bitten. The room didn't smell abandoned. It smelled damp and recently used, like showers left running. Emergency strips along the floor pulsed a dull red. Dust lay thick on the bed rails and chair, but someone had wiped a path from the door to the far wall, where an antique mirror hung, like a portal salvage from a drowned hotel. It was wrong for a hospital. Too ornate. Bronze frame with knotted vines and little faces where the leaves should have been. The glass wasn't flat the way modern glass is. It wavered like breath had softened it. I could see myself there, faintly, the red emergency light washing my features as if I were underwater. Then I saw the marks. Handprints. Palm smears dragged downward. The glass was warm under my knuckles. Warm like skin. That is the first detail I cannot rationalize. I shut the door and locked it. I told myself I wouldn't go back. At 2:13, I heard it. 3 knocks. Measured, unhurried, like someone with all the time in the world. The sound came from the wrong direction. Every sensible instinct said stay put, but my job is to walk toward calls for help even when help should not be necessary. I walked. The air chilled me in layers, ankles, ribs, throat. The door to 313 stood closed. The tape flapped once, although no air moved. I pressed my ear to the wood and listened. Breathing, not mine. When I opened it the second time, I brought my phone set to record. The mirror held a smear of condensation like a veil. A word had been traced there with an imprecise finger. It said let. Then the fog bled and the rest appeared slowly, the way a message appears on a window you remember touching. At 3:04, I made rounds. I worked by flashlight beam, checked oxygen tanks, murmured to the timid, and promised it would be fine by dawn. I believed it, then like a lie told enough times to settle in your bones. Radios died. The landlines at the station spat static and then gave up. The only phone documented to still carry power during an outage, according to an ancient laminated emergency card, was in 313. Of course it was. A maintenance guy named Holt stumbled out of the stairwell around 3:48 with a toolkit and no color left in his face. I hailed him, relief rising. He swayed. Lines are good to the box, he said, words dragging. Something is pulling load from this floor. His eyes drifted toward the abandoned hall, and I didn't correct him when he said a prayer under his breath. Stay with me, I told him, but he staggered forward the way men do when pride is a leash around their throats. He reached 313 first. He put his ear to the door like I had. He jerked back as if slapped, mumbled, "Don't look at it," and sat down hard. His pupils were blown wide, and his breath fogged the air, though my own didn't. I angled the flashlight to check his pulse, and the beam crossed the door. Faint light leaked from the gap beneath. Not from our power. A different kind. Petal soft. The gleam you get when a lake catches moonlight you can't see. I didn't want to open it again. I told myself I would shout for security even if the radios were dead. I told myself dawn was only 2 hours away, that I could wait. Then a patient alarm chimed down the hall and forced my hand. If a call light triggered in this outage, it meant someone was up and moving in the dark, and I would not risk a fall. I ran the remaining rooms fast and found nothing flashing. Nothing at all. The sound had come from nowhere I could place. It was quiet when I returned. Quiet and wrong. Holt had slumped sideways, mumbling, she's smiling, like a kid half asleep and begging not to be woken. You will think me foolish, and maybe I am. I opened 313 and went straight to the phone by instinct, because instinct is a script you follow when your brain is busy negotiating with fear. The receiver was heavy, the kind they used when ashtrays were still nailed to tables. I pressed it to my ear and found nothing, not even dead air. Instead, I heard a sound I could not carry out of that room with me. I heard my own voice in the line, whispering my name like a lullaby, and behind my name an echo with teeth. It said, "Elena, let me." My flashlight beam slipped to the sheet I had taped over the mirror. The fabric sagged inward as if it had taken on weight. You have seen curtains breathe with a breeze. This was like that, but inward, as if the room on the other side had its own wind. The tape along the top peeled itself, loose 1 crisp inch at a time. I told myself humidity could do that. I told myself glue fails in storms. The last strip snapped and the sheet slid to the floor, not dropping so much as surrendering. The mirror shone with a light the rest of the room did not have. It rippled, not like glass, but like something stretched just taut enough to reflect without breaking. Every training I had about staying calm in code blues failed me then. I should have backed away. I should have dragged Holt down the hall by his belt if I had to. I took 1 step toward the mirror instead, the way you approach an animal that might be beautiful enough to spare you. My reflection stood a fraction out of rhythm. Not the way a lagging video does. The way a person does when she is pretending to be you, but doesn't know your timing yet. Her smile rose before mine. I did not raise mine at all. She touched the glass and fog spread under her palm from within. 5 fingerprints bloomed in perfect clarity, longer than mine by a joint. I told myself out loud, like a nurse instructing a trainee, turn around, leave, lock the door. Saying it broke the spell enough for a step. At the door, the knob turned warm in my palm, then hot. The room temperature rose by degrees that felt like a fever climbing. I yanked, but the hinges groaned and held. The latch felt soft, the way a mouth might if you try to pry it open. Behind me, water pattered on the floor, and I made the mistake of looking. The mirror was beating with condensation now. Each drop ran upward. I cannot explain it in a way that seems sane. Gravity failed where the glass began. I ran for the cabinet and grabbed gauze and a roll of surgical tape, as if I could bandage a wound in a wall. I taped an X across the mirror because you tape XS on windows when hurricanes are coming, as if that stops glass from becoming knives. The tape stuck, then slid sideways like sticky notes on a greasy page. The whisper rose. My name, my name, my name. It sounded like gratitude, the way cats purr while they knead at you with claws. Holt muttered, "Don't look," again like a mantra, and I understood he meant the mirror, not the door. I tried not to. I failed. I looked. My reflection had changed. She wore my scrubs, but not my fatigue. Her hair lay smooth instead of frizzing from the damp. Her skin flushed like someone who had been laughing. She lifted her right hand and showed me a small crescent of white on her ring finger, like a scar from jewelry worn too long. I have never worn a ring. The mark made no sense, so my brain filed it in her details to worry about later. Later has not arrived. She mouthed a new word I did not want to hear. Trade. The first time I caught the maintenance log about 313, I was in the records room looking for a patient chart somebody misfiled in 1980-something. The folders there smelled of paper and dust and old coffee. I found a blue binder with facilities stenciled on the spine in cracked white paint. About halfway through, a note in a different hand than the rest said, "Mirror sealed 1982. Do not break glass. Salt line repaired. Door pinned." There was an initial, a loop I can't quite reproduce, and a page number. I flipped to it and found a separate incident report clipped to the log. Containment performed per instruction of Dr. P. Nursash. Objected. Patient volunteered. Mirror displays condensation from within. Repeat attempts unsuccessful. Beneath that, in pencil, she whispers like she knows me. Here is where I confess my red herring. For an hour, I blamed the nurse. The clipped note, Nurse H, objected, felt like a denial of culpability, the kind people write when they want to wash their hands clean. In my head, Nurse H bungled a ritual, failed a patient, trapped a thing hungry enough to learn our names. That story satisfied me because it had a villain with a badge like mine. I was wrong. The patient had volunteered. He said, "Mirror me," as he died. He had become a bridge willingly, not a victim. The horror wasn't an accident. It was an agreement. That truth made the mirror's warmth make a new kind of sense. Doors opened best from both sides. I could have left the room then. The door had cooled. The knob turned with a wet squeak, like skin sliding on porcelain. I set my foot into the hall and felt the relief rush my bones like hot tea after a winter walk. The whisper quieted, not gone but farther. Choice is rarely a question of courage. It is a question of death. Holt lay there muttering, and my mother needed that bonus, and dawn would come in an hour, and I had fulfilled no one's expectation except fears. I closed the door again. I tell you this because the moment I did, possibilities narrowed. That is what a point of no return feels like. Not a slam, just a click. I picked up the receiver one more time to prove it was useless. Instead, I heard dialing, not from my hand, from somewhere else. A far tone, and a voice at the other end, a woman with the cheer of someone who doesn't hate her job yet. "Central," she said. "Operator." My mouth dried. "We have a power failure on 3. I told her, and my voice doubled in my ear, my reflection speaking with me. "What floor?" the woman asked, and in the glass my other self answered faster than I did. 13, she said. "We do not have a 13th floor. You're waiting for me to say the mirror self stepped out then." She didn't. She stepped back, and for a second the mirror showed a room not mine. A hospital room, yes, but the windows wore daylight the way ours wore storm. The bed was empty and neatly made. A clock on the far wall read 7:06, and I knew that our clock read 4:06 because my brain filed numbers under survival. A calendar in the reflection hung, turned to June when it was March. That was the first time I understood the mirror did not show a simple opposite. It showed a place where time moved in its own weather. When the first hairline crack shivered across the glass, It sounded like ice breaking on a winter pond. Instinct lifted my hands in apology. "I didn't," I said, and laughed because what else do you say to a door that complains about you like a friend you've wronged? The crack didn't spread. It bent, the way ligaments bend just before they tear. I remember the note. "Do not break the glass." The warning was not to protect the mirror. It was to protect us from what happens when a door stops being a door and becomes an opening. Holt tried to stand and failed. "Leave," he said, eyes watering. "Leave," he said again, and the second time his breath fogged as if he stood outdoors with snow coming. I said, "I hear you," and I meant it, but my feet stayed planted. The mirror self put her palm to her side again. I matched her without wanting to, the way babies mirror their mothers. My skin felt warm. The glass felt warm. The heat spread up my wrist, my forearm, a wave that was not mine. I heard myself say, "Okay," and I don't forgive myself that. It happened without ceremony. The surface of the mirror softened like a soap bubble and took my hand to the wrist, then the elbow. I didn't sink. I was pulled. The sensation was not drowning. It was being helped into a bath by someone gentle who wants you comfortable before you realize the water is too hot to bear. I resisted, and resistance made it hurt. I went farther in, and I saw her grin, and there's a difference between a smile you perform and a grin you cannot hide. She grinned like a child reaching a cookie jar. "I'll tell you something you won't like. I did not fight hard enough. I thought, for a breath, that maybe I could switch for a minute. Maybe I could come back. Maybe she would help the patients while I rested in whatever bright room lay beyond." The human brain is a scientist of rationalizations. I trusted that small hope the way a diver trusts a thin rope to guide her back to the surface. When the glass closed over my shoulder, my hair floated around my face like I was underwater. Sound changed. The hospital's storm-muted moan fell away, replaced by a hum like a blown bottle at a child's birthday party. I turned my head and saw the mirror from the other side. The room I had stood in seconds before was a pane in a wall I could press my nose to. Holt lay askew. The emergency strips pulsed dull red. The mirror frame's bronze vines looked reversed, a left-handed copy of themselves. And there my place she stood. She touched her lips in a gesture I own, that nervous press that flattens them when I want to think before I speak, and she made it look like triumph. "I have rounds," she said, and her voice came through the glass with a softness that felt like a hand over my mouth. I banged on the inside. You have to know that I banged until my palms bruised, until my throat burned with words that had no weight. Nobody hears you from in there. You can see. You cannot be seen unless the rules decide someone earns that privilege. For a moment, Holt turned his head toward the mirror. Recognition flickered and died. He said, "Don't look," and meant it like a prayer against himself. He crawled backward. He did not speak my name. From the inside, the mirror room extended farther than the hospital room allowed. Corridors branched out where walls should have been. They weren't corridors exactly. They were reflections of corridors, glossy and perfect, like a showroom for realities. In each, I caught sight of frames holding other places I half recognized. A restroom I had clean blood from last winter. A break room where someone had carved a heart into veneer. A pediatric ward with a mural of whales that had always unsettled me for reasons I could not articulate. These rooms were all empty. Every mirror I passed showed a version of me already a step ahead, ready to lead me somewhere I did not want to go. A smell met me there. Not disinfectant. Ozone, the cold sharp tang that comes before lightning. Under it, wet bark and the faint sweetness of old breath. I thought of the fingerprints I'd seen from the hallway and looked. They were here too, layered and layered until they built up a kind of frost. My own palms fit into them, as if the glass had memorized me over a lifetime I did not recall. That is the worst part. It felt inevitable, like meeting a friend whose name you had not remembered yet. I followed the hum to a closet I had never seen in the real ward. Inside, Salt lay in a half-erased circle around a stool. A nurse's cap, the old kind, sat folded there like an apology. A page from a spiral notebook leaned against the wall. Second containment failed. It read in tidy block letters. He kept saying mirror me. Took him at his word. Door wouldn't close until I said it back. If you hear her, don't answer. If you must answer, don't smile. H. I touched the H with a finger that shook. I had blamed the wrong person. She had tried to hold a door shut with nothing but stubbornness and etiquette. When you're inside, time folds, but duty does not. I checked the mirror wall that looked back into 313 again and saw my double doing what I would have done if I'd been less tired, more kind, more awake. She straightened charts. She adjusted blankets. She soothed Mr. Lawson in 209 without flinching when he grabbed her wrist. She even tucked Holt into a wheelchair and rolled him toward the elevators with care. Watching her work felt like insult and mercy both. She was better at being me than I had been that night. The thought lodged like a needle in my throat. I tried every surface for softness. Most were hard as math exams. One oval mirror at the end of a branching hall felt like the surface of a river under winter skin. I pressed and it gave an inch. Beyond it, an office gleamed I did not recognize. The name plate on the desk was mine. Not the name I had yet, the name I planned to have in a year. Elena Vargas, RN charge. A calendar on that desk sat open to June. I remembered the other calendar. June everywhere in there, as if that month were a current running under the ice. I pressed harder, and the oval flexed like it would swallow my hand, but it snapped shut when a voice behind me called softly, Elena. You know how a child sounds when they stand at the foot of your bed at night and whisper your name because they had a dream? That is how it sounded. I turned and saw a man with a gown half open at the back and a chest gone sallow with sickness. His eyes were bright and feverless. Thank you, he said, and I understood this was the patient who had said mirror me first. For what? I asked, stalling. For keeping it open, he said. It gets hungry when the line is thin. He pointed over my shoulder toward the oval with my name and June. Don't go there. Not yet. That one cost you your mother. The word mother pulled something out of me I thought I had locked. What do you mean? I asked, and he tilted his head like a dog hearing a keen sound. You think the mirrors are fair, he said. You think the debt is even. You have not paid in full. Then he stepped backward into a tilt of silver and was gone. I would like to tell you I did the sensible thing and waited for help. I did the Elena thing and went where I was warned not to. Debt tastes like metal. You do not spit it out. You swallow and tell yourself you needed the iron. I pressed the oval and felt it give. The hum softened. My hand slipped through. Warmth wrapped my wrist like a scarf. I leaned in shoulder, collarbone, face. For a second, the office smell of coffee and lemon oil filled my head and made me dizzy with relief. I picture my mother's kitchen, her laugh, the way she says careful in Urdu, even when she is smiling. Then a clock ticked from inside the oval, steady and slow, and I remembered the list of seeds I planted in my own head. The cold drafts, the inside fog, the fingerprints, the warmth that wasn't mine, and the calendar stuck in June. Every one of those paid itself off in a single click as a thought detonated. The office wasn't mine. It was a baited version. The June and there wasn't summer. It was a date, a deadline, the day my mother's prescription would run out if I didn't make this bonus. I pulled back so fast the glass slapped flat and hummed. A filament of warmth clung to my wrist and sank like a ring that refuses to come off. I rubbed my skin and felt the shape my reflection had shown me earlier. A pale crescent where a band should be. A mark that meant someone had claimed me on the other side of the glass. I swore then, unprofessional, quiet, as if I could offend the mirror into letting me go. In the real 313, my double lifted her hand and mimed the same motion. She looked at her ring finger and smiled like a woman checking something off the list. Holt returned an hour later with 2 security guards. I watched from the inside as they fought the door that had locked itself again, as they finally forced it and found the room empty, the mirror draped neatly with the sheet I had failed to keep on it. The emergency strips glowed, white once more. The generator accepted its duty. The radios chirped. The storm moved east. My double shook the guard's hands and thanked them. She took a breath the way I do when I pretend my shift didn't break me. Then she rolled a cart toward the elevator with a gait perfect enough to fool my own mother. How long do you scream before you understand screaming is a habit, not a solution? Long enough to scrape your throat raw. After that, your voice becomes a whisper you can aim, and if you aim it precisely, if you press your lips to a pain that is paying attention, sometimes a syllable leaks. I practiced with my name first. The vowel stuck. Len. The consonant slid. Lana. The second syllable fell off. I found that questions travel better. Whispers love curiosity. That's the rule. When someone passes a mirror alone at 3 a.m. and wonders aloud, did that move? I push a faint yes to meet their fear and see if they will stop. That is how I am with you now. If you have ever walked past your bathroom sink and felt watched, that was me feathering hope through a seam thinner than breath. If your mirror fogged from within while the room was cold, that was me leaning close enough to leave a print. If your reflection smiled before you did, that was not me. That was the other one checking timing. She likes to practice. She wants to be perfect when it matters. Once, weeks after, I caught sight of a mirror that looked wrong from where I stood in my silver hall. It showed a hospital I had not worked in. New paint, better funding, hallways like polished bone. My double wore that badge. Chicago's skyline blinked behind her in a night window. She paused at a bathroom mirror and looked straight at me by accident or design. The glass fogged from the inside. She wrote a word with a finger. Later, she spelled and wiped it away, and a nurse behind her said, "Elena, you good?" She said, "Better," and I remembered the operator who'd asked which floor. 13, my double had joked to no one who understood. In that moment, I realized she had always planned farther ahead than I had. I still talk to my mother. Do not ask me how. Some nights, when she cannot sleep, she turns on the hall light and walks to the mirror she keeps too close to the stove. Steam from her tea fogs it a little, and I ride the warmth to the edge. I say, "Careful," and she thinks it is her own thought. She says it back out loud like a habit. I count that as a win. You cling to what you can when your world is polished and cold and full of versions of yourself who do not need you. What would you do if you could trade for a better life? Would you press your hand to the glass and accept a warmth not yours? Would you say, "Mirror me," like a vow? Be honest with yourself in the quiet. The mirror hears the truth there. The price is never listed where you can read it. It is folded into calendars and rings and small adjustments of timing that let someone else move first. If you feel a draft tonight and the room is sealed, if you see fingerprints on your bathroom mirror that are longer than yours, if you smell wet bark where there should be lemon, do not answer questions you did not ask. I learned too late that you can close a door. It requires a word and a refusal. When a mirror asks your name, do not give it. When the warmth offers comfort, turn your head. When your reflection smiles, if for no reason you can feel in your muscles, lift your palm and do not mirror her. Hold still and let her be wrong. Doors do not like wrongness. They stiffen. They seal. Sometimes. Not always. I will not lie to you. Sometimes the door chooses. When you finish listening to this, you will pass a mirror without thinking. That is normal. Habits keep you from seeing what hurts to see. If you keep your eyes level, your reflection will do the same. If you glance at the lower corner, you may catch me there, breath fogging a crescent against the silver, a nurse who cannot clock out, a daughter who owes more than she can pay. I will not ask you to let me out. I have learned that asking is how it begins. I will ask only this. If the glass fogs from within and you hear your name on the other side, pretend it was the pipes. Pretend it was your cat. Pretend I do not exist, because maybe then the door will lose interest, and maybe then my double will have to look farther for her next rehearsal. And maybe that buys your mother a little more time with you standing in her kitchen, saying "careful" like it's just a word and not a spell. The last image I will leave you with is simple. Another hospital, another night, another mirror left uncovered because someone thought cloth was weak protection. A new nurse, younger than me by years I did not use well, pauses at the sink and looks up. The glass fogs from the inside with a breath not hers. She leans and squints and almost smiles, then shakes her head like a horse shaking flies and walks away. The fog thins. A handprint remains a second longer than it should, 5 fingers a fraction too long, and in its center a small pale crescent where a ring might rest. I am there, not begging, just watching, because watching is what I have left. If you see me, you never did. If you hear me, you heard the building settle. If you feel the draft, a window must be cracked. If you smell wet bark, perhaps the janitor brought a plant upstairs. If you taste metal, drink more water. These are the lies you should tell yourself. They're soft blankets. They're warm hands. They're the sheet you tape over a mirror in a storm and promise yourself will stay until morning. And if morning comes and the sheet is folded neatly at your feet and the glass is clean of prints, do not be relieved. That means she remembered to be careful. That means she is practicing timing again. That means the next smile you see on your face may not be yours first. Do not smile back. Hold still. Let her be wrong. Doors hate to be wrong. Story 2. Do not wipe the mirror after 2 a.m. if you want to keep a night job. You learn which rules matter and which ones exist to look official. The rule written in red ink on the motel's housekeeping binder looked like a joke until the mirror started breathing. It said, "Do not wipe the mirror after 2 a.m. No explanación, no signature." Just that line, circled twice like someone had meant it the way you mean a prayer. I worked the night audit at the Interstate Pines, a low-slung L-shaped place right off the highway, where the ice machine rattled like bones and the neon vacancy sign flickered even when we were full. My name is Nate, and back then I needed that job more than sleep. Rent was due in 4 days. The regional manager was doing a surprise visit at 6:15. My boss had texted me a list of extra tasks with 3 exclamation points. Clean the restrooms by 2, she wrote. No excuses or the bonus is gone. Room 27 had the old vanity mirror the owner refused to replace. Big bronze frame, vines carved into the metal with little faces you only noticed when you were close. It tipped forward a little, the way pictures tilt in houses where nobody raises their voice. When I unlocked that door at 1:46, I smelled vinegar and silver polish even before I turned on the light. The bottle sat sealed under the sink. I pressed the cap and checked the paper ring. Intact. I told myself the smell must be from earlier, caught in the damp. Then I looked at the glass and saw 3 fingertip marks in a triangle near the lower right corner, right where a crescent scratch glinted like the moon on a key. If you are waiting for something dramatic, it does not start loud. It starts with a sound that makes you realize you have always been listening for it. Tick from the lobby clock. Tick from the little metronome our manager keeps on the desk to keep us focused. They were out of sync by a breath. That breath slid into the room like a draft. My own breath curled white when I exhaled. It was July. The air unit whirred warm. The mirror fogged. Not from me. From inside the glass, soft and slow, like someone leaned close on the other side. I know how that sounds. I checked the vent. I checked the shower head. I checked the wall for cracks. Nothing. My radio hissed once with the desk clerk's voice. "Everything good, Nate?" she asked, and I kept my tone easy. "Just the usual," I said, and listened to the 2 clocks tick slightly apart like a heartbeat with a murmur. When I looked back, a word had appeared on the glass where the fog was thickest, letters traced with a fingertip. It said don't. At 2:01, my phone buzzed with a reminder I'd set to keep me moving. The binder had a checklist. Mirror, sink, counter floor. I wiped the sink. I wiped the counter. I looked at the mirror and thought about the red ink rule. Maybe you've worked a job where breaking a rule feels like a test. I told myself it was superstition. I told myself I would be quick. I lifted the microfiber cloth and touched the corner of the mirror just to see if the fog would smear. It didn't smear. It sank like I had pressed into skin. The glass was warm. The warmth surprised me enough that I jerked my hand back. The cloth caught the crescent scratch and snagged with a tiny hiss you can only make with silk and teeth. The word on the glass slurred, the way a word on your tongue does when you wake too fast. Don't became D-O-N-T, then blurred away. The metronome ticked. The wall clock ticked half a beat later. I told myself I would stop because it felt wrong. Then the checklist in my head reminded me of the bonus and the regional manager and I wiped one clean confidence circle at 2:03, dead center on the warmth. What would you have done right then if the mirror did nothing? You would have finished the job and made a joke about haunted rooms and gotten coffee. That is what I expected to do. Instead, my reflection smiled before I did. Not wide, not theatrical, just a clean, small smile that started in my eyes, started in its eyes and never reached mine. I froze with the cloth in my hand. I did not smile. My reflection did, and in that second, a little static climbed out of the radio and crawled across my shoulders like a chill. I stepped away, and the glass cleared on its own, polite as a host inviting me closer. Behind me, the desk clerk's voice came through again, softer this time. "Nate, you good? That is the thing about hearing your name from more than one source at once. It feels like your life is trying to split." "Yeah," I said, then added, "How late is check-in?" As if normal questions could stitch the moment together. The radio hissed and went quiet. Tick, tick. The metronome and the wall clock disagreed by exactly one beat. At 2:14, a guest in 19 called to say someone was breathing in his bathroom. I told him it was probably the fan, which is what you say when you want to be believed. He said the fan was off. I said I would come by with a flashlight in 10. He said make it 5, and something in his tone made me promise to do it. When I hung up, I felt the mirror's warmth on my face like I had leaned too close to a stove. The condensation had gathered again, only now it shaped itself around the 3 finger marks, and the fingertip triangle looked like a hinge. You know the red herring already. I checked behind the vanity for a service crawl space. There was a hatch, the kind maintenance uses. It was bolted. The bolt had rusted in place. I hit it with my flashlight beam and saw the crust inside the threads. No one had turned that in years. I looked at the bottle under the sink and pressed the cap again. Still sealed. I told myself the odor was in my head or in the vents or part of the motel smell that never leaves, and the part of me that wanted the extra money nodded like a co-conspirator. At 2:20, I wiped the mirror again, not in the center this time, but at the lower right where the crescent scratch was. My cloth caught on the scratch the way a nail catches on a sweater. When I pulled, the scratch made a faint ringing sound in the frame. Not a scrape, a ring like a wine glass. The reflection smiled again, a fraction early. Then it leaned, just a hair like a person who wants to speak and is deciding whether you're worth it. I said out loud, "I see you," because I thought naming a weird thing might let it dissolve into something you can joke about in the morning. Something answered, and I hate that part because it means I did not imagine this. The breath on the other side matched mine for one inhale, then moved ahead of me. The mirror fogged, then wrote, "Listen." The letters were neat, almost printed like someone who learned to write by tracing stencils. I stepped close enough to see myself inside each letter, small and distorted. The tick of the metronome in the hall lined up with the wall clock now, then fell out of sync again. In that match, the mirror warmed, and in the mismatch, it cooled. I only noticed later that this was the rule. By 2:27, I was late for room 19. When I knocked, the man opened the door in a t-shirt and bare feet, breath showing as a thin mist only in the doorway. "Hear that?" he asked, embarrassed and angry like he could not decide which was safer to show. I stood in his bathroom, where our mirrors are the cheap kind, flat and mean. No fog, no warmth. The fan was definitely off. The breathing sound had stopped. "Pipes," I told him, which is a word you can use as an answer to many questions at a motel. He nodded. He did not believe me. I did not blame him. You need a micro cliffhanger right about now. Something sharper than fog. When I stepped back into the hall, my radio hissed with a voice that was not the desk clerk's. It sounded like mine, only tired and close. "Don't wipe it again," it said, and then cut out. I froze and looked down at the radio and saw the red transmit light was off. No one had keyed the mic. The hallway was empty. The tick of the desk metronome came through the open office door, steady as a metered breath. The wall clock in the hall chimed 2:35. The metronome kept counting. The numbers were not friends. I went back to 27 because I had to, because the checklist had only one box without a check mark left, and that is how you trap yourself. The mirror had fogged to a soft gray. Someone had drawn one short line where the crescent scratch was, right on the lower right, a little mark that looked like a carrot. Then, as I watched, a second mark appeared above it, a tiny triangle of 3 fingertip taps. The mirror was marking itself, or I was from the wrong side of time. I said, "Who is there?" And the glass caught a breath inside it that did not belong to my mouth. Do you ever find a note in your own handwriting and not remember writing it? That is what the red ink in the housekeeping binder felt like the first time I looked hard at it. The line was written in block letters, all caps, but the way the E's sat, the way the M's slanted, looked like mine. My stomach climbed into my throat. I took a photo with my phone, even though it did not prove anything, because a picture turns fear into a rectangle you can put in your pocket. I swiped back to the mirror camera from earlier and played the clip. In the playback, I did not move at all, and my reflection smiled and touched the glass where the crescent scratch was. At 2:49, the desk phone rang even though we were not supposed to get calls after midnight. I picked up and heard the faint looped music of our hold tone, but no one had put me on hold. Under it, the sound of a metronome. Under that, the breathing. I hung up because courage has a limit. I looked across the lot and saw the neon vacancy sign flicker to full for a heartbeat, then go back to its tired blink. In that heartbeat, every window in the L shape seemed to reflect the office light in the same way, like a set of eyes opening together. At 3 o'clock, the mirror wrote a time on itself without a hand. 3:33. I put my ear to the surface and heard a tick from the wrong side, a tick that matched the metronome in the lobby when the wall clock lagged it by a breath. The pattern was simple. When the ticks matched, the mirror warmed. When they were off, the glass cooled. Warm was open, cold was shut. If you think I figured that out fast, it is because I'm telling you now with the benefit of being trapped inside the problem for a long time. I try to be smart about it. I turned the metronome dial to slow the ticks. The wall clock kept its pace. The two drifted farther apart. The mirror cooled. The fog thinned until I could see my own face clearly again. My reflection did not smile. It waited. I turned the metronome back, faster, then faster, until it matched. The moment they aligned, the mirror fogged from the inside in a full soft bloom and wrote another word. Right. The R was mine. The cross on the T was mine. My mouth went dry because the part of me that knew my own hand understood what was coming. If you want rules, here they are. Do not wipe a mirror after 2 a.m. in a place that smells like silver polish when the bottle is sealed. Do not fiddle clocks when you feel a draft that comes from inside the glass. Do not answer when a surface writes to you in your own hand. I broke all 3 of those rules because I wanted a small stack of money more than I wanted to test my luck against a story. At 3:12, I opened the housekeeping binder and found a blank page near the back. I uncapped the red pen we use for room statuses. I meant to copy the warning so someone else would see it in my handwriting and feel what I felt. Instead, my hand started writing a time. 3:33. I wrote, and then do not wipe the mirror after 2 a.m. The line circled itself. I didn't mean to draw the circle. My hand did. I put the pen down, and the tip bled a red crescent onto the paper's edge. The radio crackled with my boss's voice then, bright and brisk like static trying to remember a person. Manager visit on time, she said. 6:15. Keep your head in the game. I focused on the tasks I could complete without looking into any glass. Trash liners, vacuum lines in the carpet, little bimats. It is amazing how much comfort there is in rectangles you can control. At 3:25, a guest in 27 tried the office door and asked for towels. I told him I had them ready, which was a lie. He smiled like a man who knows other people's lies are not about him. Then he said, "Weird thing, my mirror is squeaking." He made a fingertip circle in the air, like he was wiping fog. You expect me to run to 27 and save him. I did run. I took the towels. I went in ahead of him and told him wait in the room while I checked the bathroom, which is how you pretend to be brave. The mirror was fogged lightly with a faint handprint at the lower right. 3 fingertips in a triangle near the crescent scratch. I saw my face in the gray and it looked older. Not by years, by hours spent awake. I reached toward the glass and stopped because the metronome and the wall clock had found one another. The ticks were one sound now. My breath matched them. Warmth rolled from the glass like steam. "Don't wipe it," I told the guest, and he laughed because people laugh when you tell them a rule that sounds made up. "My wife would love that," he said. "No cleaning after 2. He raised his palm, and before I could say no, he pressed it to the glass the way people do when they test a window for a draft. His breath fogged a small oval. The mirror fogged back. He snatched his hand away. "Ah," he said, and looked to me for an explanation I did not have. I heard the radios of the highway patrol somewhere out on the interstate, snatches of code and numbers. The motel walls held their own numbers. 332. There's a way a minute lengthens when you know it has teeth. At 333, the mirror stopped pretending it was just glass. The fog on the inside thickened like breath against the scarf. Something drew a line across the crescent scratch, then pressed from behind as if testing a membrane. The warmth rose by degrees. I felt in my eyelids. I grabbed the guest's shoulders and said, "Step back." And he did because my voice sounded like someone else's. The glass dimpled outward. Not a lot, just enough to hold a drop of condensation that did not fall. It climbed. Gravity forgot what to do with it. When you want to hear about a monster, you want to know what it looked like. I can't give you that. The figure I saw was mine and not mine. The face would have been mine at a different hour on a better salary. The smile was calm in a way that tells you the person has practiced in empty rooms. It lifted a hand from the other side and touched the glass where the crescent scratch was, and the sound the frame made was a small, bright ring I knew in my bones. A wine glass sound, a bell shaped like a warning. I did not fight it with my fists. I fought it with the only rule I had left that could still move. I grabbed the metronome and twisted the dial. The ticks fell out of sync with the wall clock by a fraction. The warmth lowered. The glass stopped bulging. The figure's mouth moved in the fog and wrote 3 letters with a fingertip where my eyes would be. Why? I twisted the dial again in the other direction as far as it would go. The ticks matched perfectly for a breath. The mirror warmed like a hand. The figure leaned forward, and in the same breath, I twisted back hard and the ticks fell apart. The warmth cooled. The figure blurred and flattened until my face returned alone. The guest stood in the doorway with the towels clutched to his chest like a shield. "What is this?" he asked, not loud, as if loudness would help. I said the only thing I could say that did not feel like lying. A mirror that remembers names. He waited for me to laugh. I did not. He left the towels on the bed and said he would shower in the morning. I told him I would comp the room. I did not have that authority. I had nothing except the metronome, the wall clock, and the word I had written to myself in red ink. You think the danger passed because 333 did. It did not. The consequence echo arrived in the small, careful way night things do. At 4:07, the lobby camera showed the service hatch in 27 and the vanity right beside it. I do not know why the feed switched to that room. It never had before. The bolt on the hatch glinted tight. The vanity mirror showed the room empty. Then, for one frame, the glass darkened. A shape crossed it like a shadow, moving behind a curtain. The crescent scratch caught the light and shone like a moon caught in a tree. The feed snapped back to the front desk. The metronome ticked. The wall clock ticked with it. I set the metronome aside and turned it face down. At 5:10, the smell of vinegar and silver polish came back so strong it made my teeth ache. The bottle under the sink in the office was still sealed. I touched the cap and left a crescent of red on the white plastic where my earlier pen had bled. I wiped it with my thumb, and the stain smeared like a fingerprint. That was when I understood the twist I had been trying not to see. The red ink line in the binder was mine. Not just the hand, the timing, the circle. I had already written it, so I could read it earlier and fail to obey it on time. The mirror had not warned me. I had warned me. I had been late. At 5:52, a man from 27 came to the desk with his bag and a face like someone who forgot how to sleep. "Check out," he said, and I handed him a receipt before he asked. He looked at me for a second like he wanted to mention something embarrassing. Then he shook his head and said, "You should oil that bathroom fan." He left a review later that said, Clean rooms, quiet night. Mirror acts weird, with 3 stars and a winking emoji, like a person who had backed away from the cliff's edge and decided later not to look down. I waited for the regional manager with the lobby spotless and the metronome tucked in a drawer. The wall clock ticked alone. The neon vacancy sign buzzed in a tired loop. My boss arrived at 6:14 and walked the property with the cheerful menace of someone who calls herself a team player and means it. She ran her finger along the baseboard where dust hides and found nothing. She checked the ice machine and nodded once. She opened the housekeeping binder and looked at my red ink line, the one I had written an hour earlier to warn myself about 2 hours before. "Cute," she said. "Did you add that?" "I think it was already there," I said, and my voice did not shake. She smiled past me at the clock. "On time," she said. "Good." Then she frowned at the clock. "You know this thing is off by a beat." She tapped the glass. The tick did not change. "Get maintenance to fix it," she said. "We need consistency." I told her I would, and she left, and I stood alone with a rule that had not saved me and a pair of clocks that needed to disagree so I could sleep. You probably want to know if I saw the figure again. Yes, it likes palindromes, so it favors 101 and 2:02 and 3:33, hours that fold back on themselves like a mirror's idea of time. It likes the crescent scratch because it is a place people touch. It likes names, and it learns them fast. Some nights I wake at home, and the bathroom mirror is a shade too warm, and the smell of polish is in the vents, and I say my name out loud, just to hear it from my own mouth before anything else can use it. If you have ever done that and told yourself it was anxiety, I am here whispering that it was not only that. There is one thread I cannot pull without unraveling something I might need later. The housekeeping binder has a second note now, written below the red line in a different hand that I am afraid is also mine. It says, "If you must, write the rule. Then keep it," and under that, a crescent drawn like a careless moon. I do not remember writing it. I believe I will. The mirror likes loops. It will get what it wants. Maybe not today. Maybe at 3:33 next week when the metronome and the wall clock line up by themselves, and I am not there to twist the dial. If you stay in a motel and smell vinegar where you shouldn't, if your mirror fogs from the wrong side on a warm night, if 3 fingertips tap a triangle by a tiny crescent scratch, do not wipe the glass after 2 a.m. You will tell yourself you're stronger than superstition. You will tell yourself you need to finish the list and earn the small money that stands between you and a late fee. I know. I did. The bonus paid my rent. The mirror kept my smile. That is not a metaphor. The next time I laughed with my mouth open, my reflection waited half a beat and then followed as if it had learned by watching. It looked natural enough that I almost believed it was me again. One last image to leave with you, and then you can sleep or pretend to. It is late, and the interstate pines is almost empty. Room 27 is quiet. The vanity's bronze frame holds the dim morning like a bowl of tea no one drinks anymore. The crescent scratch glints faintly, as if it remembers light better than the rest of the glass. The lobby clock ticks. The metronome, face down in the drawer, ticks anyway because some things do not care if you hide them. The mirror fogs from the inside, and a fingertip draws a small red crescent right where a pen bled onto a different page at a different hour. Then the fog thins. The crescent remains 1 heartbeat longer than it should, and if you blink you will miss it, which is exactly how the mirror likes to work. Now we move to the 3rd story soon. If this one made you glance at your bathroom, tell me which moment hooked you most. Story 3. The apartment mirror that shouldn't reflect, the mirror stopped reflecting me at 11:11. I stood right in front of it, toothbrush humming, and the glass showed an empty bathroom with the light on and a towel crooked on the rack, like a stage waiting for an actor who refused to enter. My breath fogged the air, not the glass. Somewhere behind the wall, the UPS backup hummed, steady as a held note. A metallic rain smell seeped from the vents, the scent you get after a storm when coins have been left out on wet concrete. The stove clock blinked 11:11. The mirror fogged from the inside and wrote 3:13 in a slow, patient hand. I am Zara. I had moved in at 12, 2 weeks earlier with my brother Daniel's spare backpack and a cat named Pepper who judges furniture by how loudly it complains? Rent was low if I promised to handle minor maintenance myself. I said yes because the interview that could fix my income problem was scheduled at midnight Karachi time, and I needed steady power more than I needed sleep. The building had no 13th floor on the elevator panel. The super smiled when I asked and said tradition. Then he handed me 2 letters addressed to 13B because the mail room is stubborn even when architects are not. I told myself the mirror was an easy fix. A tilt, bad glass, light at the wrong angle. I waved my hand, then waved my phone flashlight. The reflection stayed empty. Pepper hopped onto the sink, sat facing the corner, and meowed at a spot that looked like unremarkable paint. He refused to look at the mirror, the way cats sometimes refuse to look at a person who is not fully here. The UPS clicked as if clearing its throat. Outside, the corridor lights dipped for a breath, came back, and the elevator dinged though no one called it. In that blink, the mirror shivered with warmth, as if someone had leaned in from the other side to read the date on my face. At 11:13, the glass woke like a slow eye. My silhouette appeared, not quite mine. It raised its hand a half second before I considered moving, as if it had guessed my choice early. I said my own name out loud, the way you do when a room feels too large. Zara. The mirror wrote a smaller word under the 313, just a curve and a tail. Hi. I wiped steam from the lower corner with a towel to reveal what I already knew. Nothing changed. The towel dragged over 3 tiny nicks in the bronze frame at eye level, 3 little bites in the metal I had not noticed until they tugged the fabric like teeth. I needed to focus. Midnight was the interview. Load shedding would hit the building at 12:45. The UPS said I had 55 minutes of clean battery if I avoided boiling kettles and hair dryers and hope. Daniel was staying over because our mother had an early shift and the buses were unreliable. He played on his phone in the living room, legs tucked under him, one earbud dangling. I told him not to touch the breaker box. He nodded and asked if he could name the cat's new toy. He called the braided string snake. Pepper batted it and then turned back to the bathroom door with his shoulders high. I left the mirror alone and opened the service panel behind the vanity because the last tenant had left a note on the lease folder. Flip breaker before cleaning mirror. I assumed the warning meant avoid shock, not avoid something with a mouth. The panel door squeaked. Behind it, concrete. No crowd space. No two-way window. I slid my phone into the gap and filmed. The video showed gray rough surface, a dead roach, and the coin-bright gleam of a nail head hammered flush. The red herring should have died there, but my brain stored it anyway. I like my horrors with screws I can turn. At 11:21, I made a mistake that felt harmless at the time. I blew warm air on the glass and with my fingertip wrote my name small as a test of the way steam holds writing. Z-A-R-A. The letters stayed longer than they should have, like gum that refuses to let go of a shoe. Pepper flattened his ears and tapped the corner where the 3-frame nicks lined up. The glass warmed under my finger, not on my side. I pulled back and the 313 pulsed once like a heartbeat and then waited. The elevator chimed. I stepped to the hall and watched it glide past 12 toward 14. The panel showed 13 for a breath, the way a thing reveals itself when no one promises to believe it. My stomach lowered as if the floor rose. The corridor lights steadied. When I returned to the bathroom, the mirror had a small palm print at child height, damp as if a kid had touched it after washing their hands. Daniel was still on the couch. He looked up when I called and raised his palms, dry and clean. The print fit a child who lived on the other side of the glass. At 11:33, maintenance responded to my earlier ticket with a knock that sounded like knuckles counting 3. The tech came in with a camera snake, clucked at the panel, pushed the lens into the dark, and showed me the concrete wall again. No void, he said. He held the CO detector up and waited. The light stayed green. He laughed about last tenants complaining of strange drafts and told me the building was old, but not haunted. On his way out, he touched the bathroom mirror with the back of his hand and said, oddly warm, like it had been sitting in the sun. I told him it was past midnight, and he looked at his watch and said no, not yet. The interview link arrived early with a cheerful chime. The recruiter apologized for the hour and said they were excited to see me. I checked my camera in the laptop preview. My face looked like I had been inside a box of dust. I combed hair, changed into a blouse that suggested I had a plan, then stood in the bathroom to adjust the collar. The mirror showed the empty room again. It wrote 12:21. Pepper growled, a sound I had never heard from him, small and serious. He lifted one paw and batted the exact spot where the 3 nicks aligned, as if touching them in sequence from left to right. The lights dipped again. The elevator stalled. I heard it shudder somewhere between floors. A thin metallic whine traveled the shaft, the sound of cables under a new kind of weight. The panel read 13 before it blinked out. In a mirror, I saw a hallway that was not mine. The same paint, the same cheap art prints, but the angle was wrong. A door across that hall bore a small brass plate, 13B, as if someone had taken a picture of my building and folded it, then drawn numbers in the crease. I reached up and tapped the 3 nicks with my fingertip in the order Pepper had suggested. The glass rippled. Not much, just a shiver a lake gives when fish test the surface. A voice that was my voice said soon. It came from a mirror, not the room. I pressed my ear to the glass and heard a hum like a UPS on a higher floor. I drew back in time to see the hallway on the other side brighten, as if a door had opened and admitted a colder light. Someone moved to child height, too quick to focus. The reflection did not wait for me. It lifted an arm, palm out, and pressed from the other side. The print landed in the same place as the small hand. For a breath, the palm bulged toward me like the glass was skin. Daniel patted in, yawning, phone in hand. He reached for the tap to splash his face. The mirror fogged before he leaned over the sink, etiquette reversed. I yanked him back by the elbow, gentle but fast and pointed. He squinted and said there is nothing, but the air between us was warm the way a cheek is warm after someone whispers close. When he left, a wet smear remained low on the mirror where his head would have been. My phone camera recorded a delay, so small it made my eyes water. The copy of me in the glass yawned, then I did, as if it had stolen the impulse and handed it back too late. The mirror wrote a new word under the numbers. Sign. I stared at my earlier fingertip test, the little Zara I had written in steam. Consent, the glass suggested. I scrolled messages to check the landlord's note again. Flip breaker before cleaning mirror. He texted once more while my thumb hovered. If it acts up, flip it. Then leave it. The UPS clock read 12:40. 5 minutes until the cut. 55 minutes of battery if I kept everything lean. The interview was coming. My brother was sleepy and trusting. The cat would not look at the reflection. The elevator sighed like a hell breath. At 12:45, the building went quiet. Fans paused. The stairwell lamp hummed to black. The UPS clicked to battery and began counting backward. 55 minutes. I could keep the Wi-Fi and run the call. I could cut the UPS to 0 and kill everything, including the mirror's warmth, and protect the apartment by the oldest method we have. Flame out. Door shut. I looked at Daniel. He was setting out Pepper's dish like he was at camp. I looked at my calendar and saw rent dates multiplying like reflections in windows at night. I walked to the UPS and held the off button. The mirror fogged in response and wrote wait in letters big as my hand. My finger hovered. I remembered the elevator showing 13 when the lights blinked. I remembered the 3 nicks and the way Pepper batted them. The battery clock blinked down. 54. I shut the UPS off. The apartment fell into a hush so thick the human noises in the building felt far away, as if we were underwater. The mirror did not dim. It darkened, like a pond under thin ice, transfers light differently than air. Time inside a quiet apartment widens. My laptop screen showed the recruiter's team entering the call, faces boxed and friendly. The microphone icon crossed itself out. I typed fast, brief outage, reconnecting shortly, apologies. The mirror held the hallway with 13B in perfect stillness, as if it had been waiting for the exact minute when my choices ran out. Moonlight slid a thin blade through the kitchen blinds and landed on the frame. It touched the three nicks and made them gleam like a constellation I should have recognized. At 3:13, my stove clock blinked in the dark to announce itself. The mirror brightened without light source, as if it owned its own weather. Someone stepped forward from the other side. She was my height, my body, in my interview blouse that I had not put on yet. Her face looked rested in the way faces look when they have been sleeping while you have not. She smiled without showing teeth. The surface between us warmed the way skin warms before a fever. Pepper hissed so fiercely that his front paws both struck the exact spot where the child handprint had lived, as if he could spoil the grip. I understood the rules in a rush then. The three nicks were not decoration. They were code. Touching them aligned time, not glass. The elevator's Phantom 13 was not a mistake. It was a hinge. The only way to thicken the barrier was to break the alignment. I ran into the hall barefoot, hit the elevator button like I was calling an ambulance, and when it opened, I smacked door hold and pressed 1 and 4 together, a trick I had learned online to confuse cheap panels. The display blinked, coughed, and between 12 and 14 a 13 held steady for 2 beats and then flickered. Inside the apartment, the mirror's warmth thinned by a breath. The copy's arm that had begun to push lost shape, like water poured into a mold that had changed. I ran back to the bathroom and slapped the three nicks out of sequence. Random order, frantic. The glass whined as if a wine glass had been rubbed too hard. It did not shatter. It spiderwebbed in frost lines that melted and vanished. The copy leaned hard once, and the surface refused, not with violence, just with inertia. A child-sized handprint remained on my side, drying too fast, the edges climbing instead of falling. The UPS beeped reclaim power now, and the timer made its own case. The interview window showed the recruiter pinging hello with a smiley that didn't know about hidden floors. I pushed the power back on, and the router blinked like someone waking who isn't sure which room this is. I typed another apology and hit join, and the camera found me, and the reflection in the laptop looked like me in a room that had recently learned a new rule. The interview began late. My answers felt like stones I carried from one bank to another while pretending I was light. After, I sat on the bathroom floor with Pepper draped across my knees, alert to the corner he had chosen. Daniel slept with one hand flung over his head, a kid in a safe camp despite the mirror that had tried to write our names. The stove clock blinked 4:02. The elevator chimed once for no one. The UPS breathed its last beeps and clicked back to building power as the lights climbed today. The recruiter emailed at 8:17 to say the role had been filled. They thanked me for my time. They encouraged me to apply again. A small part of me felt relief, the part that did not want to sit under a ring light, while a different me practiced my timing on the other side of a polished sheet. I cleaned the bathroom like a person who wanted a surface to be only a surface. I left Pepper's nose marks where they were. I taped a paper over the three nicks because it made me feel like I had thrown a towel over a birdcage. I wrote a note to myself on the inside of the medicine cabinet with a marker that squeaked. Flip breaker before cleaning mirror. Then I wrote another line. If the panel shows 13, do not speak. Saying nothing is the kind of spell, a small, stubborn refusal. It is not much, but it is what I have. That night, when the building was loud with families returning from visits and the smell of fried onions moving through floors like music, I took the elevator alone. The panel lit clean numbers. 10, 11, 12, 14. No ghost. In the polished steel of the doors, I fixed my hair and did not try to catch myself moving out of rhythm. The doors sighed open on my floor, and in that thin seam before they parted, the reflection behind me resolved into two faces for one heartbeat. The second stood perfectly still, wearing my interview blouse I had put back in the closet. The panel light flickered 13 and then cleared. I told Daniel nothing that would make sleep harder. I taught him to press 1 and 4 if the elevator misbehaved. We made a secret code. He liked the idea of being a spy against a number that was not supposed to exist. Pepper took up station by the bathroom door every night and dozed with one eye cracked, a sentry with a tiny pink tongue visible in his sleep. The metallic rain smell visited sometimes when the windows were shut. When it did, I turned off the UPS and told myself I was saving battery, not time. In the morning, there was a package on the mat, brown and soft at the corners from travel. No return address. The label was handwritten, careful, with the confidence of a person who fills out forms all day. Zura, it read without a last name, and under that the line I had started to expect and not accept. 13B. The postmark was from the previous week, before I had seen the number on the elevator panel, before I had written my warning to myself inside the cabinet, before the mirror had drawn my name and asked for a signature. I did not open it. I carried it to the closet and slid it onto the top shelf where we keep winter sweaters and the good towel. I told myself I would return it to the office and insist they send it back to sender. I told myself there are doors you close by refusing to touch the handle. The truth is I listen for palindromes now. 11:11, 12:21, 3:13. When the stove clock offers one, I find somewhere else to look until it passes. It feels like I'm letting a small train go by without me, like I am choosing the slower bus home where the driver knows the names of the kids on his route. If you ever move into a building that pretends it has no 13th floor, check your mirror at night. If the glass shows an empty room while you stand there, do not sign your name to test it. If the frame has 3 nicks at eye level, treat them as you would a code that belongs to someone else. If your cat refuses to look at the glass, sit on the floor with him and face the corner together until the warmth goes away. If your power dips and the elevator whispers 13 between 12 and 14, press your mouth closed around every curious word. The mirror likes questions. The mirror feeds on manners. I'm not brave in the way stories want. I am practical. I keep a list taped to the inside of the cabinet and a breaker I flip when the air smells like wet coin. I tape over the nicks and pretend that tape matters. I tell my brother to keep his palms off the glass. I say no thank you to a blouse that fits me better on the other side. I understand that there is a corridor stacked where no blueprint has room for it, and that sometimes a window becomes a door if you touch the right marks in the right order, and that there are people there who can wear your day better than you, and that the cost is not money. Tonight, I will sleep. The UPS will hum until it does not. The elevator will pause like a person thinking. The mirror will breathe when it thinks I am not listening. The package on the shelf will not rattle. Pepper will settle by the door and watch the corner where the paint never changes. If the glass fogs at 3:13 and writes a single curve that looks like a greeting, I will look at the floor and count backward from 9 and let the minute move past me like a bus I cannot afford to board. I will not sign again. I will not press the marks in order. I will keep the corridor closed by being late on purpose. Now we move to the 4th story, if you are ready to keep the lights on. Which moment in this one made you glance at your mirror? Story 4. After midnight in the mirror, maze you learn to trust signs when you work nights. But the mirror maze at Blackwater Fair taught me a different rule. After midnight, signs lie for the living. I was doing final sweep when my reflection smiled a heartbeat before I did, and the glowing exit over my shoulder pointed left in the glass while the real stencil arrow on the floor pointed right. Hot dust rode the bulbs. The calliope lullaby from the carousel drifted thin as thread. Something sweet like beeswax leaked from one polished panel, as if the mirror itself had been fed sugar and told to sing. My name is Malik. I'm 26, the closer for attractions, and the maze is my last stop before I turn keys in and sign a closeout sheet that holds my rent together. My sister starts college next term. The extra bonus for a perfect shutdown covers her books, and I had promised my mother would be clean, safe, and routine. Lila was supposed to check out at midnight with me, voice dancing ahead of rules like always. She filmed little night tours for the group chat. Policy says never walk the maze alone, clip the buddy rope at the waist, and lock at 12:15 sharp. Rain started soft and then got confident. In the control booth, I logged the sweep and watched the tiny pressure plate map blink like tired stars. Lila's should have crossed and disappeared when she badged out. Instead, it hovered near the second bend and then dimmed like a breath held too long. I texted her and saw the typing bubble start. Stop, start. No answer. The calliope climbed one crank sharper, not louder, just needling, as if the teeth of the song had been filed. I told myself she was pranking for views and palmed the rope anyway, because rules have a way of sounding like premonitions. Her lanyard lay on a bench inside the entrance, laminated badge face down as if ashamed. Her phone rested beside it, recording light pulsing. I tapped play and watched myself in a nearby panel. I stood still with hands on hips. My reflection lifted its chin and smiled like it had a secret. The camera mic caught a dull click. The mirrored exit arrow behind me flipped directions like a weather vane catching a wind I couldn't feel. I stopped the clip and looked up. The real exit hummed steady. The floor arrow pointed where paint said it should. I told the empty booth, cute, and didn't believe myself. While I'm anxious, I write lists. Into my notes app, one typed the things that felt wrong. Map folded backward. Read you are here. Never matches. 3 scuffed arrows on the wax floor, all faint, all pointing different ways. Calliope gets sharp when glass feels thin. Buddy rope and carabiner clip even if it looks silly. One panel smells like honey and candle smoke. As I typed, the emergency lights did a self-test. For the length of a breath, every panel caught its own ghost. In that blink, the exit sign in the nearest mirror turned left with a soft click, then turned back as if embarrassed. I clipped the rope around my waist, the other end around a stanchion ring, and propped the staff door with a rubber wedge because doors change their minds when you need them most. The bulbs hummed low as I entered. I followed the painted arrows toward the right fork like the handbook says. They slid me into a lane that looked true until the maze laughed quietly and ended in a silver wall. In a glass version, the exit pointed left toward a panel that didn't look passable. I reached and found the seam gave under my palm as if the mirror were breathing in. The rope tugged once as if someone far ahead on my line had turned a corner. I turned the other way on principle. The calliope sharpened a half step. The way a kettle begins to sing before steam is obvious. I eased through the gap the reflection offered and found a corridor I know by feel, suddenly hateful for pretending to be ordinary. Beeswax drifted again. The safety mirror stood near the next turn, the one we polish with wax to give nervous guests a confidence boost. It showed me with Lila behind me, waving like she'd been there all along. I glanced back. No one. In a glass, she smiled first. I slapped my own clip, found it still locked, and swallowed the part of me that wanted to call the manager and beg absolution. The folded map from the booth crinkled in my pocket. When I held it up, the printed lines made no sense. When I flipped it backward and pressed it against the panel, the corridors matched like a transparency finally said on the right overhead. The safety mirror breathed honey into the air. Somewhere beyond the rain, the generator coughed. In my head, a timer began even before the parks did, the way you know exactly how long your luck will hold. 12:12 slid by, and my reflection counted it with a blink that wasn't mine. The scuffed arrows on the wax reminded me of mistakes people make when they panic. One pointed toward the laughing clown face. One aimed at a lane of convex glass that pours you tall and thin. One spiked toward a narrow turn that felt wrong in my ribs. The bulbsome climbed. As the pitch rose, the wrong turn warmed under my fingers. I took it, hating that it worked, hating more how right it felt. At 12:21, the lights trembled and sang. The arrow paint flashed as if wet. Lila's voice called my name from a fork, close enough to lift the hair on my arms. It was her, then not her, like a voice passed through a straw between rooms. I turned toward the mirrored exit, not the painted one, because I had finally learned the rule that wanted to be learned. She stood in the panel ahead, tapping glass with 2 fingers and mouthing Malik, her lips early and eager in the copy world. I raised my hand, and hers met it just a hair before mine started to move. Something heavy clunked in the hall behind me. Auto lock on the exterior doors. My wedge would hold the staff door, I told myself. The buddy rope pulled slight and then eased like a fish testing line. I edged forward and the safety mirror on my back exhaled warm sweetness. Beeswax and burnt sugar. I had laughed about that panel for years. Tonight, I wanted to hug it like a tree that remembered your name. Lila's bracelet charm, a tiny moon, glinted on her left wrist in the glass. The detail felt wrong, and I couldn't place why, which is how dread likes to introduce itself. Rain took the park and sanded it to silence. At 12:40, the generator died with a sigh. Emergency lights hummed, and the countdown began at 18 minutes. I pushed my radio button and heard only my own breath. My phone said 3%. The wedge under the staff door had tripped a silent alarm. My key fob blinked rejection from inside, as if I'd locked myself out of my own choices. I said to nobody, propped the door to stay safe, and it sounded like a defense you rehearsed before you need it. Both choices were wrong. Keep the safety mirror intact and risk the thing that had learned to smile like me stepping out wearing my lanyard. Smash it and lose the straightest path back. The calliope somewhere beyond the rain did a bright little flourish as if to say hurry. I left the mirror hole and hated myself gently for it. The reflection nodded like it had been waiting for that exact excuse. The rope tugged again, and this time it felt like the tug came a fraction early, as if my reflection were learning my timing and planning to arrive before I did. Glass is weather if you stop insisting it's only clear. The bulbs rose into a needle of sound. The map in my hand became a confession. It had always been printed for a place that touches ours only at certain notes. The service hatch I had counted on was jammed from our side, pressure from some other corridor pushing back. My stanchion camera caught me standing still while my reflection moved and then froze, embarrassed, as if it had realized it had told the truth in public. I reached for the painted arrow and then didn't because the hum said no. With 10 minutes of light left, I flipped the map and pressed it to the glass until the backward "You are here" dot sat neatly on my reflected shoulder. The buddy rope around the safety mirror's frame warmed under my hand like a living thing. The hum peaked. I stepped forward. The corridor smelled like opening day before 1,000 hands touched it. The footprints on wax ahead were crisp, clean, pointing toward a turn I'd never noticed in daylight. No going back, I said to myself, admit the kind of promise you don't make out loud unless you're willing to pay. The mirrored route runs close to the real one, like a story you almost told honestly. At the next junction, Lila appeared on both sides at once. On my left, she waved, grin a fraction too toothy, eyes bright with an eagerness that didn't reach deeper than the glass. On my right, she pressed her palm to the panel, and her gaze had the thin sheen you see when someone's been crying and wants you to pretend you can't tell. I breathed beeswax and the metallic tang of old dust. The moon charm flashed again, left wrist in one world, right in the other. My stomach chose before my head did. Timing mattered more than courage. The calliope's high note made a seam around the right-hand panel vibrate. I dragged the flipped map along the glass, lining the red with a faint hairline that hadn't existed until the pitch sharpened. Hardware clicked behind me. The safety mirror gave up a backward breath, as if it had been vacuum sealed, and someone pulled the tab. The buddy rope slackened around my waist. In the reflection behind me, my double looked down and unclipped first, a lesson he had practiced by watching me hesitate. I yanked the rope while I still could and toppled the safety mirror onto its cradle, letting it lean into the frame with a heavy complaint. I had never broken park property on purpose. The choice tasted like a coin on my tongue. Lila's real palm pressed harder. I swung my elbow into the safety mirror's edge. Wax made my skin slide. I hit again with the carabiner like a hammer. On the third strike, I found the resonance that lives in all glass and untied it. The panel tore itself apart with a sound like ice admitting it can't carry skaters anymore. Shards rang across the floor and through exit in every direction at once, none aligning with any other. The bulbs stumbled out of pitch, came back scrambled, like a choir that lost its conductor. The corridor air-cooled. The opening behind me sealed without ceremony, as if it had never been an option. I slid my palm to Lila's real hand through the panel that had warmed under the high note and pulled. She came through like climbing out of a lake. Warmth beaded between our hands, then vanished, and I heard the faintest suck and release, like two rooms losing contact. The emergency lights announced 1 minute left in a voice too flat to argue with. My reflected double slapped the intact frame between us and left a palm print that dried wrong, edges curling as if thirst could be visible. I did not look for myself in his face. I looked at how he held the keys and saw he favored the other hand. Small mistakes are the mercy we get. We ran, rope trailing, map useless again, the hum settling into a low, ordinary buzz that sounded like safety only because we wanted it to. Security met us at the staff door with big eyes and calm hands. The alarm was loud now that people could hear it. I tried to explain honey-scented glass to a man who owns a clipboard. He looked at the shatter panel, then at my carabiner, then at the wedge under the door, and told me the damage form would eat my bonus and maybe my next two. Lila stepped in front of my words and told him I'd saved her, which was true the way you say someone saved you from drowning after they threw the rope you chose to grab. The manager arrived humming the Calliope tune without noticing, tapping the rhythm on the broken frame like the habit had lived in her hands for years. She swept glass into a glittering hill. I watched one shard lean against another and show me an exit arrow pointing left while the sign on the wall pointed right. The staff door across the service corridor sat slightly ajar, the wedge kicked aside. A damp palm print bloomed on its wire glass, then faded as if the hand that left it had second thoughts. The manager didn't see it. Or maybe she did and had learned not to say. They made me fill out an incident report at the ticket booth counter, ink smearing where rain found the heel of my hand. Lila sat on the bumper of the security card, eyes shiny and dry, describing the way voices sound when they come from behind you and above you at once. The close-out sheet didn't include a box for broken timing. It did include a line that now says bonus forfeited. I signed because a signature is a small door you can at least choose to open or not. The door chose me back, and I felt the echo in my ribs. When I was alone again under the overhang, I unfolded the reversed map and pressed it to the ticket booth window the way you press a cold drink to a bruise. The red "You Are Here" dot pulsed as if a battery lived under the paper. It began to move very slowly through a corridor we had not walked in hours. I watched it slip around a printed corner and out of sight right as the Calliope hit a metal-loving pitch. I told myself it was a glitch. Glitches are kinder than admitting that a reflection has a route nobody paid to draw. On my way past the carousel, I stood and listened to the lullaby. It's cheerful when families are near, a hurry up and have fun melody. After hours, it sounds like a hallway that learned to sing. I caught myself humming along and shut my mouth like I'd almost told a secret to the wrong friend. Rain ticked on the canopy. I could still smell beeswax on my sleeve. I rubbed my thumb and felt grit from the safety mirror's edge, relieved to find a small, bright cut there that hurt in a normal way. Back at the maze, I crouched by the stump where the safety mirror had stood. The frame looked older than the others once you noticed. Someone had carved a tiny bee into the wood at the bottom center, so small you'd miss it unless you were looking for where sweetness enters. I wanted to apologize to a piece of furniture. Lila bumped my shoulder and said, without irony, that breaking that panel felt like breaking a spell. I said, without bravado, that spells are just rules we don't know we're obeying yet. The words sounded borrowed from someone braver. On the gate padlock, a drop of water gathered and clung like a thought trying to become a word. I watched it swell and then choose to fall. The path lights blinked to morning brightness as the park woke. For a moment, their buzz matched the bulb's needle pitch exactly, and the panels everywhere seemed to tense, like a body remembering pain that no longer exists. The moment passed. Scuffs on the floor dried into harmless smears. Exit signs faced the direction management printed. The wedge went in my pocket, warm as a warning I might need again. If you ever have to close a place full of mirrors, bring extra rope and a friend who enjoys breaking rules for the right reasons. Watch the lights. When the hum goes high enough to make your fillings ache, don't trust paint. Press paper to glass and see which path smiles back. If a panel smells like beeswax, be kind to it, but be ready to choose a side. If you wedge a door, understand that open for you is open for whatever learned your timing by standing behind the glass while you practice being brave. I lost the bonus. We made rent with overtime, and my sister sold 2 textbooks back. It felt like losing and winning at once, which is the maze's favorite joke. Some nights, I wake with the taste of burnt sugar on my tongue and a song laid across my teeth. On those nights, I don't look in my bathroom mirror right away. I listen for pitch. If the hum is low, I brush and laugh at myself in plain light. If it needles high, I open the freezer and breathe cold like a superstition that has not failed me yet. When I hand the keys back now, I don't say goodnight to the mirrors. I say, be honest, and mean it as a dare. Lila still films, but she keeps her bracelet on the right wrist where it belongs. The security guard who loves clipboards taps the plywood patch over the safety mirror and hums without knowing why. The reversed office map keeps its red dot very still during the day. Last week, after close, I swear I saw it twitch. Maybe it was a bug. Maybe that's the kindest name for a path that shouldn't exist, but keeps inviting you anyway. If you visit Blackwater Fair and the maze is closed for maintenance after rain, it might be because we broke a mirror on purpose to keep a better version of someone from leaving. It might be because we forgot which arrow to follow and needed to make the corridor honest again by making it ugly. Or it might be because the staff door near the back sits a centimeter more open than it should, and a damp palm print appears and fades when the calliope hits a certain note, and some of us are waiting with rope and a map we pretend we don't believe in. I will probably never get that bonus back. I'm learning to want different prizes. Yesterday, I walked the maze with daytime families and pointed kids toward the safe turn. One of them asked why the exit in the mirror pointed funny. I said mirrors make their own rules sometimes. The kid accepted it faster than any adult would. Later, as we locked up, a breeze moved through like a voice that decided not to speak. The bee carved into the frame, caught a speck of gold dust, and held it until the light changed, and then nothing held anything. You can buff courage like wax until it shines, but you still have to hit the right thing at the right moment. You can follow policy, clip in, log your sweep, and still need to learn the difference between paint that insists and glass that invites. If a reflection smiles first, wait until you hear the pitch before you smile back. If the exit points left in the panel and right in the room, choose the one that knows your name and wants to teach you a song. Then keep your rope ready for when the song changes keys. That night, after paperwork and apologies, I took the long way to the lot. The carousel lights winked out one by one. The calliope sighed into silence. In the ticket booth glass, I saw only myself and the neon drip of rain. Then, faintly, in a corner that had never mattered, a red "you are here" dot pulsed and began to move at the slow, steady speed of someone who knows the maze and intends to walk it again. I didn't follow. I let it go where it was going and locked the gate, listening for one last needle of pitch that never came. Now we move to the final tale for tonight. Story 5. The Shattered Mirror That Remembers Names. Total word count. 2,900 words. The mirror cracked again at 3:07 in the morning. A thin sound like ice learning it cannot hold a footstep. I woke to the soft snap in the living room and the whisper that followed. A voice so close to my ear, I flinched even though I was alone in bed. It said a name that was not mine. Reza. The apartment felt colder than it had any right to be. The windows were sealed, the radiator hissed like a tired snake, and still my breath rode a small cloud in the dark. Lavender and smoke drifted from the hall, the exact scent of my aunt's perfume, the one she wore to funerals and holidays. How many names does a mirror remember before it wants yours to? I am Amira. I catalog documents for a living and label everything, even fear, even blessings. Last month, I inherited an antique mirror from my aunt's flat along with a short list of instructions she had scrawled in the last week of her life. Keep it covered when you sleep. Do not move it on a Friday. Never feed it your name. The frame is heavy wood carved with climbing leaves. Age has lifted the varnish into ripples that catch light like old water. The glass is not flat. It holds the room with a slow curve that makes corners look farther away than they are. Money is strange right now. I told myself I would keep it until I could afford an appraisal, then sell it to someone who likes old trouble. Elias helped me carry it up the stairs. He teased me about keeping a haunted heirloom and kissed my forehead when I sorted the screws like a surgeon. He is practical. He thinks fog is a physics problem and creaks are houses shrugging their shoulders. The first night, when the mirror fogged in a single oval at mouth height while the radiator ran, I laughed at myself so he could laugh too. Then another crack ticked in the upper right, and the fog wrote a small mouth-shaped curve like someone tasting a word. It did not spell anything. It felt like rehearsal. I told Elias I would call an appraiser soon. I did not tell him I had begun sleeping with my back to the wall. 7 nights after the first crack, a second line appeared. It curved to meet the first the way roots do when they find water. I stood there holding a dish towel like a shield and listened. The sound came again. Nura breathed into the room like warm breath on glass. The voice did not match anyone I know. It had the weight of being used to speaking in rooms that answer. Elias said pipes. He tapped the radiator with a spoon and made a polite tink sound he offered as proof. I nodded because nodding is easy, and because my aunt's note said, do not argue with what wants your attention. On the 9th morning, I found a shard on the rug under the frame. It had fallen sometime after I went to bed. Only a sliver, crescent-shaped, light as thumbnail, sharp enough to pretend it could cut anything important. I picked it up with a dishcloth and looked. The shard did not reflect my hand. It showed my bedroom, my own bed, the lumpy throw pillow I hide under the good pillows when company comes. I saw me, asleep, hair over my mouth open a little in the way that makes me grateful no one watches me at night. The shard held the image without movement, like a paused video. I set it face down too fast and cut the cloth. The sound in the glass, invisible but certain, laughed like a little crack unzipping itself wider. I keep a ledger now, not for taxes, for truth. Cracks forming a ring, half around. Names whispered that don't belong. Lavender and smoke. A warning in my aunt's hand about names as keys. Elias's reflection one beat behind his face. Shard shows wrong room. Archivists copy what matters before the page can burn. I copied the warning where I cannot miss it. Never feed it your name. The words looked old the moment I wrote them. I taped the paper inside the hall closet, so I would read it every time I reached for a coat. When I closed the door, the mirror breathed out a thread of cold like a person pleased to be remembered. On the 14th night, the whisper changed. The apartment was warm. The food on the stove smelled like cumin and lemon, and I was barefoot on the mat pretending my ankles do not mind standing. The mirror fogged anyway. Tiny beads gathered and ran together into a single oval again. Iskander, it said, soft and respectful, as if introducing someone important. The name slid under my ribs like a hand. I said out loud, to the empty hallway, I do not know you. The mirror replied with the quiet you get from a person who understands you're lying. Elias laughed in the kitchen and called, you're braver than the radiator. And I said I am not, and meant every word. You will ask when I made the first mistake. Mistakes rarely announce themselves with trumpets. Mine was small and tasted like longing. My aunt's journal slid out of a box when I was dusting the shelf. She wrote tidy, impatient lines. She named the people who disappointed her and the ones who saved her at least once. Between notes about my mother's stubborn kindness and a recipe for a lentil dish I cannot recreate, she wrote, Mirror arrived with the Blue Bureau, 1978. Sounds like breath sometimes. Never feed it your name. Under that, in the smallest script, forgive me. I should have closed my mouth and folded the page. Instead, I said her name out loud, as if it were a blessing. The crack in the glass deepened a hair, the way ice thickens when a new freeze begins. Lavender rose until my throat itched. Why is it always love that opens doors? Elias did not hear that one. He was brushing his teeth, and the sound folded what he could notice in a foam. He is kind. He is also tired of my habit of wishing for patterns. When a mirror said his name one night with a fondness I have not earned, he stopped laughing. Elias, it breathed, and the fog shaped a low curve exactly where his mouth would be. He stared at me like I had finally made a joke that did not land. Then he stood too quickly and hit his hip on the console table and said something that tasted like apology meant for the wrong person. He slept on my side of the bed that night, so I would be between him and the door. In the morning, he apologized for that too. I started covering the mirror with a sheet every night. I tucked the corners under the frame the way you tuck a child who refuses to admit she is afraid. By morning, the sheet had slumped to the floor, folded into a long, neat line, as if someone had slid it aside with a careful hand. The falling shard made a soft clink I didn't hear until I stepped on a piece through the fabric, and it found skin. A thread of blood walked my heel across the kitchen tile. The shard I picked up showed a new room. My aunt's bedroom, I think, though I never slept there. The bed was empty. The sheets were twisted like someone had been getting out of bed forever and never finished. Lavender lived in that shard too. I set it face down with the others and felt myself add a small lie to the ledger in my throat. The appraiser came on a bright Tuesday and wore white gloves like a surgeon who likes an audience. He called the frame good work and the glass interesting. He spoke the way men speak when they intend to give a number that will hurt but want to be remembered as gentle. While he ran his hand along the lower edge, the crack pulsed. I saw it. He did not. The air that came off the glass cooled the sweat on my wrist. A whisper rose. Nura, again, almost bored. The appraiser's mouth kept moving. He said something about market, cease production, provenance. Then his eyes drifted 2 inches to the left of my face and stayed there. He put his gloves in his pocket without noticing, said, "I will email," and left before I could ask him whether he had ever seen a window choose who it reflects. Every 7 nights the ring grew. First a quarter, then half. 3/4, then a hair more, then stop, the way the body pauses before pushing. The mirror did not hurry. It liked to practice like a singer, placing a note in the rafters. The night it reached almost all the way around, the apartment felt quieter than when we first moved in. We stopped touching the glass. We stopped saying our names aloud in the hallway. Elias's reflection lagged by a heartbeat so often that he began to avoid mirrors, which is hard in a city where windows are more honest after dark. We started writing notes to each other in the kitchen, as if speaking would teach the mirror the cadence of what we wanted to save. I kept reading the journal because there was nothing else that felt like reading the future without cheating. There were simple recipes and scoldings and gossip that made me smile alone. Then, between a grocery list and a sketch of a potted fern, she wrote, "Names are keys. Never feed it your name. If you must speak, speak mine." I tried to pretend she meant a different mirror. The lavender that drifted out of the living room said otherwise. When I fell asleep on the couch once and woke with the sheet half off the glass and my throat dry with perfume, I dreamed my aunt sitting on the blue bureau holding a shard to her ear like a seashell. Her mouth moved. I could not hear what she was telling me. When I woke, the room smelled like a match blown out, and I had a stupid desire to look nice for someone I could not name. The red herring would have been easier if it had been true. Cracks from age, drafts from old windows, voices through vents that share secrets no one intends to share. I bought a carbon monoxide detector and waited for it to chirp. It breathed green like a saint. Elias taped the window seams with the precision he uses for mending cables. The fog on the glass still appeared when the room was warm, and when I spoke in the kitchen, the mirror answered with a breath at the exact syllable that would have made a better story if I were inventing it. Finally, because I wanted a rule that would obey me, I asked, "Are you in there?" And the mirror wrote yes, slow as a finger in steam, the S dragging like a signature. We argued at last. Of course we did. Elias said, "Sell it. Sell it broken if you have to." I said, "I promised I would keep it until the cracks speak." He looked at me like I had joined a cult and put my aunt at the center. He is careful with his anger. He folds it small and only lets it warm his voice a little. That night, he slept on the sofa, and I slept in the bedroom with the door closed, and the mirror whispered my name with a patience that felt like kindness until I remembered what happens when you praise a habit. Amira, Amira, Amira. The sheet held. The words still found the seam under the door. I covered my head and thought of the cracked ring like a mouth making a careful O. At midnight on the 28th day, the ring closed. I did not watch it happen. I felt it The way you feel the lift of an elevator without movement. The way you know a storm has reached the building when the air inside your mouth tastes like metal. The glass brightened without light. In the shards on the side table, faces I did not know looked at me with the quiet that follows the end of a long story. One mouth moved slowly like a person rehearsing a word he has not said in decades. Reza. Another smiled and pressed her lips to the curve of the shard, as if that could be a kiss. Nora. The smallest face blinked once and turned slightly so I could see the silver bead of a piercing. Iskander. If you collect enough names, you can set a table. What do you serve people who have been behind glass too long? Elias texted he could not do another night of breath and drift and names that did not belong. He said, I love you. He said, I need sleep. He said, call me when you sell it or when it leaves. He locked the door carefully when he left, and the carefulness made me love him more. The apartment listened to me listen. The light in the hallway went out for no reason. The building paused the way bodies do when they want a sneeze to pass. I stood in front of the mirror and put my hand to the sheet and felt the cold through fabric. It was the kind of cold that is not an absence of heat. It was a presence knocking politely. There is a point where keeping silent is not bravery. It is a surrender with better posture. The ring flared. The cracks did not split the glass. They made a door. Lavender and smoke rolled out like steam when you lift the lid on a pot you forgot you were warming. The mirror said my name again, softer this time, as if I had approached and it did not want to scare me. It offered me my own voice, saying please. I heard my aunt's laugh braided into the word and forgave her, because forgiving is easier than anger when the thing you want to yell at is glass. I knelt because the shape of the moment demanded it. Sometimes you have to meet a door at its height to speak in a language it believes. I put my mouth near the crack where the sound was clearest, and I said a name with care. I did not say my own. I did not say Elias. I said my aunt's, whole and complete, attached to her father's name and her mother's like a string of beads or a warning you only give once. The glass warmed like breath, then dropped in temperature until the skin of my lips prickled. In a shard on the table, my aunt's bedroom rearranged itself. The sheets smoothed. The impression of a body climbed out of the mattress and lifted as if obeying a command. The mirror swelled with the tidy noise ice makes when you run a hot spoon along it. The sound lived in my teeth. The cold pulled the muscles of my jaw tight until I felt it in my ears. My aunt's voice came out of the seam with the weight it had when she told me not to skip lines in books, not to cut corners on recipes. She did not say my name. She said hers, once like a person who signs a form and waits for the world to change. It did. The ring brightened a second time. A shadow that wore my face leaned toward the opening and smiled the way I smile when I think I have finally found the right word. The double's arm slipped through to the elbow, skin reflecting firelight I could not see from my living room. Her sleeve was the sweater I had put on the chair back 2 hours ago. She looked pleased with me for inviting her. I have never liked being thanked for things I did not mean to do. The trick, if you want it in a single sentence, is that a name is a key, but not all keys open the door you expect. I had offered one that did not belong to me, and the lock turned the wrong way. The double smile disappointed the way a teacher's does when you have managed to do the right thing for the wrong reason. The shards on the table lit one by one, like candles catching. In each, a face I had not known until the mirror taught me to recognize them paused in whatever room it had been holding and looked up. The bead of his condors piercing flashed. Nura shook her hair back the way women do when they are tired of gravity. Reza held his hands out like a person who expects to catch something heavy and does not mind the weight. In the largest shard, my aunt stepped into view for the first time. She looked younger than when I last saw her and angrier. She put her hand on the inside of the glass like a supervisor at a window. The double pressed harder, and for a breath the ring widened, welcoming and ugly. I lifted the sheet with both hands and snapped it over the mirror like catching a bee in a jar. The cloth clung. The cold seeped through. The lavender thickened until my mouth tasted like soap your grandmother warns you not to eat. The names in the shards began to fade, one by one. Like people leaving a party you did not notice was happening in your kitchen. My aunt did not. She stayed. She put her mouth to the inside and said, not a name, but a word I had not expected. Enough. When the sound broke, it did not shatter like a plate. It cracked inward, the way a crust collapses when the heat below is stolen. The ring lost its light. The cold lifted. The cloth warmed the way fabric does when a person sits under it in a patch of sun. I waited for some obvious sign that I had sent something away or locked something in. The only proof I had was ordinary. The apartment took a breath. The radiator sighed. The refrigerator hummed a little tune to itself and then forgot the words. The shard that shows my bed did not go dark. It kept showing me, asleep, mouth open, hair in my face, though I was kneeling in the living room watching myself sleep somewhere I was not. Elias came back at dawn with his shoulders hunched like a man who expects to be told he is too late. He stood in the doorway and listened without interrupting. He is practical. He understands the difference between asking what happened and asking why you let it. We wrapped the mirror in 2 blankets and slid it into the closet I had emptied for coats that winter never came hard enough to demand. He labeled the box with his tidy handwriting because it comforts both of us to act like careful storage can keep a problem from remembering our address. I swept up glass with a dustpan and brushed lavender off the rug with my knuckles because it felt rude to vacuum the scent of the dead. We did not sell it. The appraiser's email arrived at lunch. He offered less than it deserved and more than we could refuse. I did not reply. I wrote him only, "Thank you," and closed my laptop like a person deciding to carry a debt a little longer to avoid paying with something she wants to keep. That night we ate on the floor because I had not moved the table back and because I did not want a place sitting near the closet door. Elias refilled my glass twice before I asked. When I fell asleep on the couch, he put the blanket over my shoulders without waking me. I know because I woke hours later warm in a way I never am by myself. The cracks have not moved since. The ring sits quiet under the cloth. Some nights the apartment smells like lavender anyway, faint and curious, like a cat from a neighbor's hallway that slips in and walks a neat circle around your shoes before leaving. I keep the ledger. I add a line when something changes. Yesterday I wrote, "No names whispered, new quiet, shard still shows me sleeping." I have turned the shard over a dozen times. It still shows what it chooses. When I hold it at a certain angle, the room in it grows brighter, as if someone opened a curtain I cannot see from here. I do not bend it to catch more light. I'm not a monster. Sometimes I talk to my aunt the way I used to when she pretended she was not listening to me ask for advice. I say, "You made rules for me and I followed them badly." I say, "I use your name and I feel both sorry and not." I say, "Did you mean to stay where you are, wherever you are, or did I fail you?" The shard does not answer with words. It offers images I can pretend are nothing. The bed I own looks made more often than I make it. The pillow that hurts my neck is gone. The blanket you gave me with the moth-eaten edge lays smooth as if it has never seen a claw. If you want mercy in a mirror story, you will have to bring it yourself. If you take anything from me, let it be this. Do not speak your name to a reflection that asks kindly. Do not mistake a sheet for a lock or a laugh for a warning you can ignore. If the glass fogs when the room is warm, leave. If it says a name that is not yours, do not answer as if politeness is a weapon. If you have a ledger, use it. If you have a partner who believes you will apologize rather than thank the wrong thing, keep him. If your aunt tells you not to feed something that remembers, understand she is telling you what she learned the difficult way, and that sometimes forgiveness has to arrive first. I like endings that close doors with a click you can trust. This is not that. The closet door swells in the damp and sticks and slides, and some mornings it opens a finger width no matter how carefully I lean the old suitcase against it. The shard on the table glints at certain hours, as if the light you cannot see has opinions. When I hold it in my palm and tilt it toward the ceiling, the sleeping woman's chest rises and falls in a rhythm that is mine when I am most exhausted. Last night the mirror did not whisper. The shard did, soft as breath through a keyhole. It said my name the way a person says please at the end of a sentence she has practiced. I put the shard down and went to bed and lay awake. Elias turned in his sleep and found my hand and held it like it was the thing we owned that night. The apartment warmed by an inch. The city's old pipes sang their ancient song. My heart took the beat it likes when it believes I am safe and gave it back to me. In the morning, the closet stayed shut. The shard did not glint. The ledger did not ask for a line. I made coffee for two and pretended I did not notice how much better it tastes when the kitchen smells like nothing at all. If the mirror calls again, and it will, I will be late answering. I will speak a name that belongs to someone who wanted to be remembered and is. I will not give it mine. If my aunt appears in the shard and takes a breath that sounds like relief, I will choose to believe I did something correctly by accident and let that be a kind of victory. If you find yourself in front of a glass that remembers names, I hope you have a list written in a neat hand somewhere you can reach without looking. Read it before you listen. Promise me you will not smile back first. One more image before you turn me off and go look at your own reflection the way a person checks a lock twice before trusting it. In the dark living room, a box sits behind a closet door that looks like all other closet doors. The sheet inside rests over wood carved with leaves whose veins have learned more than they were carved to hold. On a low table, a crescent shard lies face up, obedient. In its small surface, a woman sleeps in a bed she recognizes. The shard fogs and clears like a window when someone breathes close. The breath counts timing, patient as a librarian checking out books. The breath knows my name. Tonight, I let it keep the knowledge as a kindness I can afford. Some say mirrors are only glass and silver. Tonight, you and I learned they can be so much more. We walked through 5 stories, each one showing us that reflections are never as simple as they seem. From the hospital room that stole a nurse's smile, to a motel mirror that waited until 2 a.m., to an apartment glass that refused to reflect, through a carnival maze that lied with its exits, and finally, to a shattered heirloom that whispers names in the night. Every story reminded us of one chilling truth. Sometimes what looks back at you isn't you at all. If you've ever caught a glimpse of something wrong in your reflection, a movement too early, a face too still, you know how easily these stories could slip into reality. Maybe they already have. Which of these mirror tales haunted you the most? Tell me in the comments. I read every one, even late at night when the screen is the only light in the room. And if you've ever had your own strange experience with a mirror, share it. You might find you're not alone. Thank you for spending your night here in the Whispering Abyss. If you want more nightmares dressed as stories, be sure to like this video, subscribe, and keep the bell on. That way, when the next tale waits for you, you'll be ready. Until then, cover your mirrors when you sleep. Good night.